buddy.
Hey. Hi. How are you kids?
Pretty good.
Beautiful sunset.
Oh, and sunrise.
Sunrise.
Sunrise. Same as the sunset.
Moonrise. I have pictures.
Impressive the last, this last whole week.
And you're gonna sing the opening song.
Sure. Why not? Are we expecting a few people or?
Just you. I heard your voice. Right, Nicole?
Yeah, he does.
Did he sing to you at your wedding?
You did.
I heard that. Remember you guys were just babies?
Babies.
Someday I'll tell you a story about your that was
Which one, mine or his? Mine?
just a baby.
Uh-oh, I don't know if I want to know that one.
It's cute. You'll laugh.
Is Josh trying to pour up all the other?
Yeah, he's in the parking lot.
We're able to watch it rise. It's up high enough.
Yeah, that's off my front porch.
Yeah. It's like coming up like that orange, more oranges in the middle. That's what it's up, yeah. And then it looks like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so cool.
I got a pretty good camera to take them, so.
Gotta do it with that. Yeah.
This is a real camera. And then put on the chip and then
Yeah.
it's coming through. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
That's why I call it. It's not. But yeah, it's and that's what this is. Use it as a-
Right, I read that one.
Yeah. Use it
How you
as-
doing, all right?
I'm good.
Yeah. You know what I got a meeting with tomorrow at 9 o'clock? Somebody on the golf course. Huh? Somebody on the golf course. No. They're doing something for Tim.
Oh, yeah.
Elaine's son.
I just
Property next to Colbert.
Christmas light
Yeah.
produces
Oh.
lights.
So they did. A week ago, I reached out to him. I says, hey, Tim, how you doing? Send him a text. He says, hey, we're still interested in sitting down and talking to you about the property. This one with Tim? Elaine's son. Is this her property? Yeah, the one that you drew up all the plans. I says, I'm still interested in what to talk to you. He texts me back. He says, I'm out of town. I'm in Pennsylvania. But he said, I'd love to sit down and talk to you. He said, I'll be back in town next week. This week. So this morning, he texts me, he says, how does this work for you? I says, you got time tomorrow morning for a cup of coffee? We could meet and talk about the property. I says, yeah, what time? It's 9 o'clock. So I'm meeting for a cup of coffee tomorrow morning.
Mic check. Mic check.
Testing 1, 2.
Are we on?
Yep, we're on.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Village of Vernon Plan Commission meeting. Today is Wednesday, September 14th, 2022 at 7 p.m. I will call the Plan Commission to order with the Pledge of Allegiance and a standing moment of silence.
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for
Thank you, everyone. Roll call and open meeting law compliance check.
President Carl Fortner,
Present.
Trustee Commissioner Jim Solani,
Present.
Commissioner Mario Rinaldi.
Present.
Mr. President, note for record, you do have a quorum of your Plan Commission. Also note for the record that Sean Malarkey, our village planning and zoning administrator, are here. And Mr. President, I just want to let you know that you're in full compliance with the open meetings law.
Thank you. First up on the agenda is discussion and possible recommendation to the village board of a final certified survey map for Dan and Nicole Craig for their property located at S104W26630 Maple Avenue in Village of Vernon. So Mr. and Mrs. Craig are here. If you want to come up to the one or the other or both, there's two chairs. And the way we do it, of course, is our planner, Sean Malarkey from kick off your request. So listen carefully because we're going to ask you to confirm, make sure he's telling us everything we need to know. So Sean, why don't you kick us off?
Will do, as Karen's trying to get my computer, zooming in and get my computer on the overhead. If you guys recall, back in December of last year, the Craigs came before us with a conceptual plan for some of their property. You can see on the overhead up here was what we talked about in terms of, this is Maple Avenue. They own property here on both sides. It's basically about 108 acres on both sides of Maple Avenue. And then further north, they own property as well, which is about 117 acres. So this was just a conceptual road layout that showed reasonable development pattern. And they talked about splitting off a couple lots on one on the west end, a 5-acre lot, and one on the east end, which is about a 4-acre lot. Today we're talking about the split of a 5-acre lot on the west end. And as you can see by what was submitted with the certified survey map, is that the lot shape, this is 5 acres, but it's a slightly different shape and configuration. So if you look back at the concept, instead of this triangle lot, it's more squared off now. So this little piece would end up over here. So it's 5 acres, same place, just slightly different shape. It doesn't impact, in my opinion, the overall future development pattern for the property. Again, the property is zoned RRD5, which is the rural residential category. It requires a density of at least 5 acres for every dwelling unit. Because they're splitting off one 5-acre property, that precisely meets the density requirements for that district. If they were splitting off something different, larger than 5 acres, smaller than 5 acres, we would have to require a deed restriction on the remainder of the property and potentially this property as well to designate exactly where those development rights would go. But because this is exactly 5 acres, that solves all the issues. There's no problem with that. Essentially, with the split of this one lot for this 118-acre parcel, there would be 22 development rights remaining for the rest of the 118-acre parcel. This would require a waiver, however. So basically, our land division ordinance requires that everything be surveyed, the remnant parcel be surveyed as well, but we do allow, per section 200-25, any remnants that are greater than 40 acres can be excluded from the CSM if a waiver is passed per section 200-14. So on page 2 of my staff report, I did talk about the findings that the Plan Commission needs to make, taken from the ordinance, basically whether or not the waiver, if granted, would be consistent with the general intent of the chapter, whether it would adversely affect property owners in the surrounding area, whether if granted, it would benefit the petitioner's project in a way that's not inconsistent with the village's interests, whether the petitioner is in full compliance with the applicable ordinances and agreements with the village, and whether or not the chapter itself should be changed in light of the waiver. We've done this many times in the past when it's exceptionally large properties, and again, this is 118 acres where it doesn't serve any real purpose to get the boundaries of the rest of the property ahead of time. So I would be recommending that a waiver be granted for the remainder of this property with the creation of that one 5-acre lot. If the waiver is granted, I'd also ask that a note be added to the certified survey map, basically describing that the waiver was granted for the remainder of the property. On page 3 of my report, our surveyor does have a number of just small technical issues that has to be addressed. So those would have to be cleaned up. We double check the CSM after they revise it, and then sign off on it. Once that happens, it can be signed by the village and then recorded with the register of deeds. So that's essentially all I have. One other thing I wanted to mention. The actual CSM that was done, when the surveyor drew it up, they showed a 50-foot dedication on Maple Avenue. Maple's only a 66-foot right-of-way. We only require a 33-foot dedication, so that has to be revised for a 33-foot dedication. That's going to slightly change the overall configuration of the lot. It's still going to end up being 5 acres, but they just have to dedicate less right away. So this is going to be smaller. It won't be as deep as it currently is, right? So they're back an additional 17 feet from the road than they have to be. The lot will end up being 17 feet closer to the road.
So we are getting a dedication.
We're getting a dedication, but it's only going to be 33 feet.
But only for the width
Just
of that.
one lot for now. The remainder would be dedicated at the time that it gets developed.
Right, okay.
Let me just double check what the road looks like now. I don't remember if it's all dedicated there or not.
On Maple?
Yeah.
No.
Does it go to the center
It
line?
used to be a county road, and then Vernon about 30 years ago took it over. I mean, all the land.
Yeah, so in this case, there is already a right-of-way dedicated there. Their property doesn't go to the center line.
Oh, I thought you meant all the properties.
No, this one in particular.
Oh, it's already been dedicated?
Yeah, there's already a dedication there, so they just need well, their whole property, their whole north side of the property has got that standard dedication already.
North side, okay.
Yeah, so they'll just have to remedy that, clean that up.
And that's one of your conditions?
It's not it's basically the standard condition is to satisfy all planner and surveyor comments. So that's listed in the report. That's what they have to. They have to meet the technical comments for the surveyor, and then my comment. That's my only real comment is that the waiver be added, and then that the roadway. I've already talked to their surveyor about it, so he knows. It actually looks like. There's some properties in the area where the road right of way is much greater than that, but our official map shows that as a 66-foot right of way. So that's what we require.
Don't you think at the time, Sean, when those certified survey maps were created, was a county road?
It may have been, yeah, that may have been old from a county road, but it does. We go by our official map. Our official map is 66 foot, so we'll make sure that it's 66 feet. So I don't have any real concerns, or we've already looked at the concept plan.
Talked about it in December, I think.
December of last year, right? We've looked at the concept, the overall development pattern. They're just coming back now to actually create one west lot. I assume at some point they'll be back for that eastern lot.
Okay, so it's just that one lot.
Just the one.
Okay, Mr. and Mrs. Craig, did you follow along? Is that an accurate description of what you're?
That's a description of that lot, yes, but we're also, the other lot's also been done for the east. I thought we were doing both tonight.
I don't have a CSM for that eastern lot. Karen, did you?
No, I just gave you what.
Yeah, I've only seen what Karen passed along, which was the
Did you give
western
us
lot.
two maps?
Yeah, but I do have a copy of it, but it's probably too late now.
Well, it's not on the agenda for that today, and I haven't reviewed it. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I have it, yeah.
Okay.
I did send it, and maybe just because it's an attachment, maybe. Yeah,
I can double check my emails here.
yeah.
Take this for a second.
Otherwise, we're just.
Or regardless, it's not on the agenda tonight, but we'll take a look.
Sure.
Find it, Sean?
I'll look later because we can't take any action anyways.
Right, okay.
Karen do the same. So,
Questions? Comments?
We had talked about there being concern about having the access road going north off of Maple towards the back of the properties. Is that still feasible the way it was discussed?
concern about the access road?
Yeah.
Just let's make sure we got the property.
One never knows, but yeah.
So don't take this through.
We did talk
We
about it
talked
at the
about another
Porterville
piece of
property.
Was that the other?
Well, by Porterville.
That was the one
Yes,
directly
yes,
east,
yes,
yeah.
That's the one I was thinking of. Okay.
Okay. I just didn't, they were looking confused. I'm like, what are you talking about, Jim? Okay. Yes, that was an
the other.
issue in that other parcel where they're doing something similar to trying to carve off a lot. And there was no access road to the back, north to the Fox River on their property, and they were,
I
had to
got it open.
figure it out. But your property, and Sean, you don't have it up there, the one with the arrows that look like you could go, to the north, off the west. With the same,
That's what made me think about it, was I saw the
arrows.
Yeah, it's very similar. It's the property right next door. So I did check the email that I got that Karen sent me that day. The only CSM attached was
Okay.
this
That's
one.
fine. That's fine.
Okay, because we can't talk about it today.
No, so I have it here. I just opened it. It's just the 3-page CSM was the only attachment on that email.
Okay, probably last meeting then.
Yeah, we certainly can put it on the agenda for next meeting, yeah.
Okay, I can just email it later. If it didn't get there. I'll double check my emails later. Okay.
Okay, Sean, your staff recommendation report dated September 14th had, okay, so the waivers on there, I just wanted to go through it before we make a motion or so on. So your recommendation is to grant the waiver simply because it's the amount of acres and there's no real need to survey every last acre, for example.
Right.
And the waivers are permitted, but we should have a discussion regarding, the conditions in our ordinance 200-14 before we make a motion, or after the motion, at least go through those for the record. And then this is, of course, just a recommendation to the village board to approve out of this body. The very first condition is to satisfy all comments, conditions, and concerns. Sean stated that his concern was the double checking the right-of-way,
Correct.
dedication 66 feet, I think that's right. And any surveyor comments,
Right. And then the note for the waiver if it's granted.
and the note for the waiver, and the note would be
Simply
on the
to
CSM.
simply to state that the waiver per that section was granted for the remnant parcel. I just want to clarify though that the plan commission actually grants the waiver
Okay.
and then makes a recommendation to the board just for approval of the CSM. So the plan commission
So
will
I
grant the
misstated
waiver.
that, sorry. So the plan commission will grant the waiver. I think you've got that spelled out for us in the,
Correct. If you just read
yep, I
the,
see that, grants the waiver and then recommends approval of the CSM. Okay, let's talk about the waiver for a couple of minutes anyway.
yeah.
Yeah, the first criteria or factor is consistent with the general intent of this chapter. That's kind of always somewhat a little bit ambiguous for me anyway. But I think the intent is, not necessarily to require property owners to spend a lot of money when they're just subdividing off a small parcel out of a large parcel on surveyors. So I would think that would be met simply because of the amount of acreage in the back.
Yeah, and we know at some point in time it's going to be further subdivided and developed. It'd be one thing if they're creating a 5-acre parcel and leaving another 5-acre parcel or another 10-acre parcel that will maybe never get split again, and you want to make sure you got the dimensions right and it's surveyed properly. But in this case, we know there's more to come.
There's more to, right, that's right. If it was 10, yeah, another lot or 2 lots or even 3 lots, we'd say, well, but it's greater than 40 acres. That's in the ordinance, and it's 114, so it meets that 40-acre minimum. Would it adversely affect property owners in the surrounding area? Whether it's surveyed or not, I don't know that it, can be surveyed. If there's a property line dispute, your neighbors can survey it at any time, and so can you, so.
Right.
So I don't know that it's going to, the waiver in and of itself is going to adversely affect anyone. Request is granted would benefit the petitioner's project in a way that is not inconsistent with the village's interests. Of course, there's a double negative there, but I think the village's interest is, orderly development and proper lot line, marking and things like that, and to prevent property line disputes. So I'm not sure that the waiver is inconsistent with that goal.
Yeah.
And whether the petitioner is full compliance with applicable ordinance and agreements with the village, I'm not aware of anything that, that they're not in compliance with. And then the last one is, well, this is always my favorite, is why are we granting individual property owners if it's so good for them? Why isn't that the general rule? And I think to me, the intent is large parcels over 40 acres, that's stated in the ordinance. No need to survey the very last acre, but smaller parcels underneath 40. And as Sean said, well, if there's 15 acres and he's carving off 5 and there's 10 left, it may never be subdivided. So now's when Vernon's best interest would be survey the whole thing. So that's not going to happen here. And if, your children or grandchildren are subdividing that 100 acres, well, that's all the better.
We're just leasing it from them. I mean,
Right.
from them.
Right. Another
Not
way.
really mine.
Right. So I would, anything to add, commissioner members? I think it behooved us to run through those. Sean, do you have anything to add? Does that all make sense for the discussion?
Yeah.
Okay. So with that, we're looking for, if the Plan Commission is so inclined, to make a motion for the Village of Vernon Plan Commission to grant a waiver from section 200-25 for survey of the remnant parcel per section 200-14 of the Village Code of Ordinances, and recommend to the Village Board approval of the certified survey map for Daniel and Nicole Craig for the property located at S104W26630 Maple Avenue, mailing address Mukwonago, in the Village of Vernon, subject to the conditions as set forth in the Fourth report dated September 14, 2022, and the discussions at tonight's Plan Commission meeting.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion, further discussion?
We grant the waiver and then recommend to the board approval of the CSM. We don't have the final CSM yet.
No, we were approving it as it is with the changes that are in my report.
Okay, so who eyeballs it?
I do.
You do?
And before we record it, before Carl, we make him sign off on a letter that all the conditions that the surveyor and the planner make are done before we sign it.
Right.
Okay.
And record it.
Right.
And we get it in writing,
Yes.
yes.
For our protection, their protection, everyone's protection.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Nicole and Dan, this is on the town board meeting tomorrow.
Okay. Thanks.
Excuse me, village board meeting, but you don't have, Carl, do you want him there?
I don't think, you're always welcome to come, but I don't know that it's a necessity.
All right.
It's first on the agenda.
And you'll talk to the surveyor, so I don't have to talk.
Yeah, if he's got, does he have my staff report?
I can send it.
I would send it to him, and then if he's got questions, just have him give me a call.
He thought it was final, but you made adjustments, so now he's gotta make more adjustments.
He's got to make a few adjustments, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up on the agenda is a discussion of a conceptual land development by Mr. Eddie Milliken of EWM Consulting for the property owned by the Porter Brothers for the properties located on Maple Avenue with the following tax key numbers: VNT 213799801, 2135999, 2136998, 2133998, and 2134996, which is approximately 362 and a half acres. Gentlemen. So Sean, why don't you kick us off?
Actually, I would ask because of the the overall conceptual nature of this. I'll certainly be happy to fill in some details. I wondered if we just might have them just give us an overview of what it is they're looking for, and then I can fill in some of the gaps.
Mr. President, could you ask them to identify themselves?
Yeah,
I know,
I was
Mr.
just going to say, gentlemen, would you please state your name and address for the record? Thanks.
You bet. Josh Podelko with Trio Engineering.
And Mr. Milliken.
Ed Milliken, EWM Consulting.
Okay. So why don't you walk us through your proposal here? Sean, like Sean said, he can fill in some of the details.
Yeah, just give us the big picture of what you're trying to accomplish and what the vision is.
Great. Thank you for letting us come and have this discussion with you. I think it's really helpful as we start to work through the planning process, really to work with Sean, with all of you, kind of in the vision and ideas behind it. We have here 362 and a half acres, approximately, unique property in that it comes up right up and part of the ownership crosses I-43. The property, though, has a variety of unique features. It has upper, highland fields. It has woods, environmental corridors, wetlands, floodplain, adjacent to the Fox River. Really unique topography, soils, vegetation, and the idea here starts to work off of some of the conservation subdivisions that have been very well received just in this metropolitan area. It's a unique way to create a neighborhood community setting with a lot of open space preservation. Really allows people to have a neighborhood but still enjoy the tranquility of woods and walking trails and nature kind of abounding throughout it. So this plan, using lot size comparable to, as an example, like a Kohler Ridge subdivision in New Berlin, not too far from here, allows for on-site well and septic, really quality homes. And then with this plan, really trying to maximize lot locations, home locations, what their backyard views would be, kind of what their setting of their home. So we've created a conservation subdivision following the topography, the woods, and really following where the home sites want to be, both for the property that's at the intersection of Craig Avenue and Maple Avenue, and then kind of the abundant land that's north of Maple Avenue. The ask tonight really is a conversation on use, on what we see as a great vision and opportunity here, being respectful for the neighboring lands and connectivity. When you look at this plan, you see a variety of clustered cul-de-sacs, kind of a meandering through road, kind of following in the middle of that property to the north along the edge of a wooded hill, and crossing where where I think the farm crossing is today, and then access in the future to a potential road extension on lands to the east. We don't envision a road connection to the west, definitely not kind of in that northern extents where we have pretty substantial wetlands and floodplain. It really doesn't seem feasible or practical or likely. We like the situation of the land, really kind of thoughtfully planned, but really would appreciate your input and feedback on the use, because we are with this requesting a land use plan amendment and obviously a rezoning along with that to help make it happen. Would appreciate your feedback and input and just kind of open discussion and dialogue about all this. I don't know, Eddie, if you have anything you can add as far as, okay.
Well, Sean, walk us through the, at the top of your, page 2 of your report, the, how the density is calculated as our land use plan contemplates.
Yeah, I can,
Because, you know, it has been in place for some time now, and if you look at the surrounding, the subdivisions that have developed that are in compliance with that, this is, deviates from that, those other subdivisions.
well, let's start with our land use plan map, which is on the overhead. Here's the entire village, and we're talking about a property here in the very southwest corner. A lot of the more dense development is, you know, in the northern part of the village, some on the eastern part of the village, but really this Fox River South planning area is what it's called in our comprehensive plan, is primarily planned for this yellow area, which is rural residential, which is one unit per 5 acres. There are pockets of smaller lots, older lots, other small planning categories. That's the suburban density residential category. There's even and here's the property in question right here that, you know, goes up across Maple Avenue. There's even an older subdivision here to the south. Actually, this is done by CSM, a couple different CSMs on Fairview Circle, which is planned for suburban density residential, which is a slightly higher density. That was done about 50 years ago, I think. It was 1972 that was put in. But by and large, this area is planned for lesser densities, 1 unit per 5 acres. And so they're asking for a considerable increase in density. The green areas here are the environmental corridors, which is either woodlands or wetlands or sometimes steep slopes. And that's actually the same density, 1 unit per 5 acres, as the rural residential. But we'd like to steer development outside of the corridors where possible, move some of those development rights outside and put them elsewhere, as long as the overall density doesn't exceed, you know, in this case, 1 unit per 5 acres. But what President Fortner was alluding to, so essentially, according to the petitioner's application and some of the calculations that they've done, for the overall 362 acre parcel, there's 184.25 acres, which is lowland environmental corridor and floodplain, wetlands. So there's a lot of wet area there potentially. It would have to, when this is done, it has to be surveyed, and we have to look at, you know, delineations, exactly what's left over. But from the information that we have right now, that's where it stands. There's 30 acres of upland environmental corridor, meaning non-wet environmental corridor, and about 148 acres of land that isn't encumbered at all. Like, it's not environmental corridor, it's not wetland. If you do the calculations according to our current plan, the upland environmental corridor gets you, you know, again, for every 5 acres, it gets you a unit. So that's 6 units from the environmental corridor, and the unencumbered land, the same density, that's another 29 units. All you can get out of the current plan is 35 units under the rural density and the environmental corridor density. So they're asking for 100 units, which is essentially 3 times more about than what's out there today. what they would need, you'd need to change the plan category from rural density to that suburban density. This category, this next category, this orangish category would do it, because that gives you a range between 1.5 acres and 4.9 acres per dwelling unit. They'd have to go all the way to the most dense end, the 1.5 units per dwelling unit. But that gets them, that would allow up to 104 dwelling units, basically, if you change the category to that. Environmental corridor stuff stays the same. That's still calculated at 1 unit per 5 acres, but the rest could be calculated at 1 unit per 1.5 acres. So that would do it. Again, the point I want to make is that for all this property, which is essentially all of this, would be a change from rural density to suburban density. And that's not my call to make. But I do want to point out that that is a pretty large deviation from historically what this has been planned for, except for some of the stuff that that happened in the past. So that would be a deviation. Currently, it's zoned AD10, which is the ag density 10 acres, which is only 1 unit per 10 acres. So that would require a rezoning. If the comp plan gets rezoned, they would rezone the property as well. They're looking for an R2 zoning category, which would allow those lots as small as 30,000 square feet, which is, that's potentially doable if the comprehensive plan got changed. The comprehensive plan change is a as you know, a public hearing notice, class 1 notice, 30-day notice. The rezoning is a class 2 notice, which is the 2 weeks prior to the meeting. Do you want to stop there? Do you want me to get into some more details in terms of the layout? Do you want to talk about the density, or should I get into a couple more
I think we ought
things?
to talk about the density, simply because this has been shown on our comp plan for some time, like absent the things 50 years ago. And I think you're accurate that south of the freeway that you circled is supposed to be lower density. And the subdivisions, this would be Creekside, Dow Court, Sand Hill Ridge, Hunter's Run. They are all larger lots. And, those people, look at the master plan and they're buying into that with those large lots and the idea that there will be larger lots. The other issues that I see just off the top of my head is Maple Avenue is an extremely dangerous road. And more lots means more traffic, and the no exit as laid out. We have these cul-de-sac rules.
Oh, to the north?
600 feet and 1,200 feet with a waiver. And, mind you, I came from an area where cul-de-sacs were measured in miles, not feet. But our ordinances are like that for public safety purposes, and they're going to be in violation. They're going to be way past the 1,200 feet. So even with larger lot size.
Yeah, just to provide a little more detail on that, the cul-de-sac that's planned to the north, essentially it'd be measured from Maple Avenue, and then it would come up here and then all the way to the very end. That's about 4,900 feet. Again, and our ordinance only allows 1,200. They do have a connection here to the east. At some point when this develops, this would be temporary, and that would be a connection. So the ultimate cul-de-sac length would be smaller at some point, because this would be looped around. If and when this is ever developed, we have no idea when that happens. But even if
Property owner would take great offense for you even mentioning that it was going to be developed.
right, and that's still 2,100 feet of cul-de-sac, even if that connection is made. So the point is that if this would go through, or we'd entertain this, we'd have to change our land division ordinance to allow greater exceptions, which is possible. We've talked about it in the past to up it from 1,200 feet to something else in certain situations. And this, if you like this project, even if the project wasn't this dense and the lots were bigger and you still wanted to get the road all the way up there, the rationale for making adjustments or allowing longer cul-de-sacs is mostly because of natural topography, natural features where you just can't get a connection. And they're right. I mean, once you get to the north end here and develop some of this property, it's all wet. There's no way you're going to get out from there. So even if this ends up being larger lots or lesser density in the future, we might have to look at, if we ever want this property to develop back here or have a chance to develop, we'd have to entertain a potential change to the land division ordinance for that. But just another thought, another thing to consider.
But Sean, that wouldn't necessarily have to be developed with a lengthy cul-de-sac. We could have smaller, the same number of lots, 35, but smaller, and count that area toward the density up there and make it a big outlet or a recreational.
That's right. If you wanted to concentrate your lots further south and use that as transferring those development rights to the south. That is true. If they wanted to do a larger lot, if they wanted to do 5-acre lots or something, then that changes the layout, right?
But for example, we could allow 35 2-acre lots.
It's the minimum is 1 acre, and they can go as high as they want beyond
Right.
that, right?
But I wouldn't, yes, correct. I wouldn't go that minimum though. I mean, I would never, not the way the master plan is supposed to be working. 2 acres shouldn't be any smaller than that. And then the 5-acre density, in my view, just because that's the way it's always been planned.
The zoning district is AD 10, right? It's just which is 1 unit per 10 acres. Let's say nothing changed. They didn't get a rezoning, they didn't get a comp plan change. That district, though, does allow lots as small as an acre, as long as you provide at least 10 acres.
Right.
9 other acres that are protected
Right.
to develop that 1 acre lot. So in essence, when you look at a subdivision like that, it may appear that there's still larger lots, even, depending on where it's
But
preserved.
that would cut the 35 units in half, wouldn't it? 10 acres,
Yes, but under the current plan
right?
of rural density, they have the right to ask for a rezoning to the 1 unit per 5 acres. So they wouldn't likely develop this under AD 10.
Right.
They would probably ask for a rezone under the rural density and get 1 unit per 5 acres. And they have the right to ask, because our plan says that. You don't have to grant it, but the plan prescribes that as the overall density. Josh, did you have a question?
Just more of a conversation along the lines of density, and part of the Fox River South kind of planning corridor calls for preservation of the lowlands, the floodplain and wetlands, openness if there's an interest to public allocation or granting if there was an interest in the portion of land between the trail and the Fox River. But part of that, when it talks about density, for this land today, it says the density is gross density is 5 acres per lot. It doesn't talk about what that 5 acres is. There's other parts that says protect and set aside the lowland environmental corridors, and the upland environmental corridor can be developed, but no greater than 1 lot per 5 acres, kind of in line with Sewer PAC's recommendations. But gross density in the planning world is the land.
Mm-hmm.
That density is when you start removing the wetlands and floodplain. So our look at this really is not losing sight of the 362 acres, because that is the gross area that accounts for that gross density. So I think we're not really representing the land as it exists when we look at it and just look at 180 acres. And Sean, I'm curious on your input and everybody's kind of input on that, because we agree with the intent of the planning corridor to protect and set aside and make some sort of passive use out of all this abundant kind of natural area, because that is the intent of the planning corridor. So from that standpoint, I think development here, in a clustered manner, whether the lots are 30,000 square feet or 1 acre in size, is something that will be achieved, whatever this development plan will look like. Density-wise, though, that's a big swing when we take half of the land and just ignore it.
So what I think you're saying is that you're saying that the lowlands, the floodplains, and the wetlands, you think because it's part of the overall property, the overall line, that we should be able to use that acreage
That,
as part of the calculation of the density.
that's kind of something I'm interested on feedback on, because the code doesn't exclude that. It really actually says gross gross area or gross acreage per lot is 5 acres.
It does. Well, if you look at, right, but if you look at the map itself, Karen, can you put the map up? So obviously the yellow areas, we know that's 1 unit per 5 acres. We know the environmental corridor is also 1 unit per 5 acres. But it talks about, the plan does talk about the upland area to be able to achieve that density in the upland areas. It doesn't talk about the lowland wet areas. And in fact,
But that's an overlay, right?
no. The corridor?
Would that be an overlay zoning when we get to it?
The zoning's not an overlay. The zoning is C1. It's a wetland zoning. And so the plan is a little ambiguous where it doesn't really say you have to exclude the lowland areas from the overall density. But if you look at the zoning ordinance, for instance, and you look at the PUD ordinance PUDs is, you're not asking for a PUD, but many times these types of developments are done by PUD. If you look at the PUD explicitly excludes C1, high groundwater, floodplain. Any of that stuff is excluded from calculation in the density. And if you subtract that out and you do a PUD, then you get a slight bump from the rest that's remaining. So if I look to that and the intent of that, that's my interpretation. And that if going the PUD doesn't get you more density, then you shouldn't be able to get more density doing it this way and circumventing the PUD, because the PUD should be the most density you can get. And that explicitly takes out all those lowland areas from calculations.
I'm following your train of thought. It's
So-
just so interesting, how.
And I struggle with that a little bit because, again, the plan is a little bit silent on that. But if you look at the overall intent of the ordinances and the way it works out. So if we talked about or looked at a different density in this area, it would have to be based on what you get for the upland environmental corridor, and then if this yellow was changed to this orange. And again, if you do the math on that, if we change the yellow to the orange, then you're going to get up to 104 units on the property. So I think that's what they're asking is, can we change the plan from rural residential to suburban density residential? Because that would get them what they wanted. And again, I would just caution you, because that's certainly, once you do it for this one, when the majority of this is planned for this rural residential, I'm not sure, that sets a precedent for this area south of the Fox River in terms of overall planning. And that's your choice. But,
Right, but not only sets a precedent, but it changes what historically we've envisioned.
Right. And since I've been here, I've only been the planner here, I think it's been 5 years maybe. Before that, it was Jamie. I've actually never looked at this area. We've done some planning. We've done some changes to the comp plan in and around Big Bend, some of the periphery and the borders, and we increased some of the density around there where it made sense. I haven't been a part of any efforts yet to look at this area south of the Fox River, but currently that's kind of where the plan stands, is that the vast majority, especially these larger parcels, is 1 unit per 5 acres. So if you change it here to suburban density residential, which again requires a public hearing and everything else, you have to have a good reason for it and know that once you do that, it kind of opens it up for the rest of the area to be that same density.
Well, I think one of the differentiators is we are on the edge of a pretty, more dense development due west, right? We're on the freeway, and when you pan out, you start to see a lot of activity, a lot more density potential to our immediate west. So really, this land is kind of a buffer, a transition into kind of the larger kind of rural character of this community.
I do understand what you're saying. This is on the border of the village of McGuanago, which obviously is going to have more density. But there are a couple of pretty large parcels in the village that are not yet developed. They may be developed at some point. They probably will be at some point, but we're not directly adjacent to the more dense development. And, there's also no reason there's no reason that the village necessarily has to have a transition here. It can certainly go from more dense in the village of McGuanago to more rural as it gets into the village of Vernon too. So that's your choice. I mean, how you want to look at it.
And that is that was just to share, that was, part of the consideration here is location and really kind of the setting around it. The fact that we can, what we lose when we look at a two-dimensional map is we kind of lose the topography. The site is really kind of down and away from the avenue, and then really much of it hidden, as you get further into the site.
Sean, what is the proposed land use of the property in the village of McGuanago due west?
I don't know what that's planned for currently.
That used to be in town.
What's that?
At the part that Vernon Company was trying to give to McGuanago?
Oh, they were gonna give it all the way to my subdivision, Jim.
Yeah.
And just to make that point,
Well-
since neither one of you were here, politically, this is not a good situation. We had
No,
a former town board try to give this to McGuanago to extend sewer and water all the way up McGuanago, up Maple Avenue.
We're well aware of that.
Completely rejected,
Yeah.
so.
But what we're asking for is basically, and it hasn't come up tonight, what is the village looking for? Do they want anything out there, or they don't want anything? I mean, if you drive down 83, they got that huge industrial park across the street. They got the hospital. They got the YMCA. We're asking, what does the village want? This is what we're proposing, but what does the village want? Yes or no? I know there's some rezoning things here, and Sean's absolutely right. You're probably going to set a precedent if you go on this side of the street. I get all that, but I guess I'm asking, what does the village want?
Well, I think this is just me, based on being here for 30 years, being village president, and being part of the political effort to stop what McGuanago was proposing to do and our old town board was going to do and incorporate the town of Vernon as the village of Vernon. The people who live here will tell you point blank, we don't care if another house is ever built in Vernon. Point blank. And so, to me, it's like, okay, but that's, to me, an extreme position. You can't just say no one could ever build a house or develop their land. We can't say that. I disagree with that. But my point is, they want slow or no development. So you say, what does Vernon want? I can tell you what the people want. They just want it to stay the same.
Yeah, no, I get all that, but I mean, does the village want some tax base money? I mean, I don't know what the village is looking for, and that's what we're asking. What is the village looking for? And I understand what you're saying. This guy, and this guy doesn't want any building.
Right.
But it's just part of nature.
That's not realistic, though,
I
is my
know,
point.
it's just part of nature, but we're asking, what do you want? And we'll review whatever you tell us you're willing to do.
Right, well, we have a plan. I'm asking.
Yeah. I mean, I'll chime in. I mean, currently the plan says what it says, and so that's what the village wants. What the current plan is, but to second President Fortner's point here is that I don't think the village, at least from my experience here, wants to grow houses just for the sake of growing houses. We don't have utilities to pay for. We don't have, that's not the goal here. They want to allow some amount of development so property owners can, split a few houses off here and there and develop property where it's fair and where it's in keeping with the context of the surrounding character, right? To be fair to property owners, but density for the sake of density, just because I don't think we've ever talked about that being a goal.
Yeah, but this plan is so far removed from the village. I mean, you're on the southwest corner.
Oh, you mean this property itself is?
It's so far removed. I mean, you got the Fox River that divides it, you got the freeway that divides it. I mean, it's so far removed.
Yeah, but it is, but it's still in the village, and there's still houses and property owners that live here. So those people that live on Maple are in the village and still expect the village to make good planning choices.
And all kidding aside, people that live there are porters.
Sure, well, not all of them, but
No,
yeah.
not all of them. No.
Neighbors.
But
I think to finish the conversation about what is envisioned adjacent to this property to the west, it is entirely a business park. So this land someday, the neighbor to the west is going to be a business park.
yeah, I'm not sure. I have to double check, but that makes some sense.
Double check.
Yeah.
So that's, something to at least kind of factor in, and when we talk about this being kind of a transitional location into the rural neighborhood, that, not to go from that abrupt change of a business park on the highway to a large estate lot type development. I don't know, Sean, we typically would transition a little bit.
You can transition, obviously, but it's not required. And I'm not sure how visible. You mentioned the topo, not really being able to see what's back here, anyways. So if you can't see what's back there, anyways, then it's a moot point.
It's more from Maple Avenue. Our relationship is actually stronger on the land to the west than the land to the east.
And we're obviously not looking for any decisions tonight. We want you to dissect this, and we'll reconvene next month or whatever the board feels necessary to come up with another answer and question, okay? This was a first go-around, I mean, and a lot of this came out of the chute, like some of the board members probably weren't aware, or whatever, but we're looking for you to look at this, dissect it. I mean, you know what we're looking for, two things. I mean, the 5-acre density and the green space. So to make, what that does, it makes the yield on the amount of lots, make it worth doing. If not, to me, it's not worth doing.
Well, in the neighboring village, when they, again, nothing you guys did, but when they annex into the old town of Vernon and want to put in a business park, that's part of it too. We don't want development like that crawling into the village of Vernon up Maple Avenue.
Right.
It makes no sense. They've gone too far, in my view, way too far. And to say, well, your property should be the buffer, why can't their property be the buffer?
Right.
Why are we conceding to them and their land use desires? So it's just really a difficult situation.
I don't wanna speak out of line here for my engineer, but if we need to build some soccer fields out there or something to that effect to help make this I don't know. I mean, I think there's some land there that may or not be wetlands that we could put a couple of soccer fields in, or a baseball field, something to that effect. I mean, we're willing to do that.
So some sort of public park
Yes.
area.
Well, that's a good bad scenario, because now who's gonna maintain it?
Right.
Okay, so.
Well, that's a whole nother. Yeah.
I get all
When
that.
you get into the parks, some people don't like living next to parks, quite
Yeah,
frankly.
yeah.
Others people think it's great.
Well.
But
At least you don't have houses built on it.
right, that's
You know.
No, but
boy,
we're
those kids
willing
yelling
to,
and screaming, that somehow bothers people. But anyway,
Well, yeah.
we're willing to put up a few acres of, parkland there for whatever, baseball, soccer, whatever. I don't know what you have on that end of town. If there's anything out there for the kids to play soccer or baseball, I mean,
this is as close as it gets right here.
right here, okay. So we're willing to do something out there.
So that's very interesting. I guess I would just caution a little bit, only because Maple Avenue isn't intended to be, a road that handles a lot of traffic. And so once you start putting those out there, if it's soccer fields and so on, then you got a lot more.
Yeah, that was my original. Maple Avenue is a dangerous road. I drive down Maple Avenue.
Really,
all
I
the
mean,
time.
I'm surprised that you're saying that. It's pretty straight.
No,
No.
no. Craig's living.
I mean, depends on how far you get down, but I mean, you go past the nursery down through there. I mean, it seems like it's,
Well,
but it's narrow.
our sheriff's department will back me up on that. I said, well, how dangerous is Maple compared to, let's say, Edgewood Avenue? Oh, it's worse, was the immediate reaction. And Edgewood Avenue is bad enough. Well, the thing is, there's no ditch, there's trees, there's no
Yeah.
shoulder. And it's narrow.
It's not straight.
Look at the Village of
not
Vernon
straight.
Blues plan.
All right, well, why don't we reconvene at a later date and you guys can dissect what we presented tonight and.
Well, obviously the plan commission can't deliberate outside of the meeting on the agenda. They can obviously consider this individually and come back and we can talk about it again. If that's what you want to do, or do you want to get their opinion on it tonight? I mean,
I've been doing most of the talking, so.
You've been doing fine. You know, I'm hard pressed.
Sean, just send me an email and let me know what the thoughts are,
No,
reconvene.
I think we'll hear, I mean, I'd like to have discussion now.
Yeah, I'm hard pressed to understand exactly when we say 1 unit per 5 acres versus 5-acre lots.
yes, that's exactly right. They could,
Yeah,
but
I was afraid of that 'cause
they,
I'm not certain I understand the differentiation in it.
well, the density's now it's 1 unit per 5 acres, though they can't count the wet areas toward it. So if you go by that 1 unit per 5 acres on the full parcel, excluding the wetlands, et cetera, they can get 35 lots. They can be as small as an acre or up to 5 acres inside, or as big as you want to be, basically, to get those 35 lots. The zoning allows them to be as small as an acre, though, as long as the rest is preserved, right? So the overall density is what matters in terms of number of lots.
How many total lots were in what was shown there?
100. So, yeah, the overall density is just a gross density. Lots could still be smaller than 5 acres.
As opposed to 5-acre lots.
They could do 5-acre lots if they wanted to.
Well, they just couldn't get in as many houses, right?
Yeah, they would just be
Yeah, that's-
limited. They could get what they could get,
As initially drawn up, you got down to, you said 30,000 square feet.
Well, they're looking at 30,000 square foot lots so they can, they can preserve some of the existing upland environmental corridors as well as the wetlands, right? So, and 30,000 square feet is about as low as you can go in the county to get a septic system on the lot.
It's like 2/3 of an acre.
It's three-quarter.
Almost
A little less
3/4,
than
yeah.
3/4, 43,000 square feet to an acre and change, right?
Right. That's about as small as you can go.
Yeah, and the idea with doing that is, instead of having 5 acres where 4+ acres are on the lot and not preserved, we're able to take that 4+ acres and make it available to everybody and preserve it, make sure it's preserved, make sure the trees are saved. Because when it's on a 5-acre lot, you often can't guarantee how
Yeah.
it's used. But I know the flip side where it just feels different, it's your ownership. And out of curiosity, if we came in, if we had a plan where we had 5-acre lots, but 4 acres of it was wetland or floodplain, and we could get more than the 36, is that not allowed?
You'd have to change the comp plan anyways, because the comprehensive plan dictates the density regardless of what.
That's what kind of gets me on this whole issue, especially on this property where you could see even this northern cul-de-sac, you could let the big fields and wetlands and floodplain.
Do you think you could get more than 35 5-acre lots on the property? Given the layout?
I haven't done that yet.
I think if the lots, so let's say we didn't have to, we have to rezone it, right? I mean, it's got to be rezoned according to the plan for 1 unit per 5 acres. I think if you could show that with a road in there and you could get 5-acre lots, even if they included some wetland and so on, that might be okay. But I mean, one of the things we always try to do, regardless, is to try to move the wetlands and environmental corridors off the lots, no matter what. I mean, that's always something just like the county tries to do. We don't want to have wetlands on lots that you're creating if we can avoid it.
Well, I guess what's kind of the take, I know that is kind of our normal plan, and that's a conservation kind of cluster theme, and it's in the comp plan, even for the village here, to have these wetlands and floodplains on an outlet. But I also hear some interest in having it be on a lot. So I don't know which is a stronger pull.
I mean, if I had my way, I'd say off the lots, smaller lots, but not 100 lots, right? I mean, smaller lots, but that's just, in my opinion, too much density for
Yeah, not 100. Let's say it's not 100.
their property. Right. I mean, I'm always going to push to have wetlands environmental corridor off, but anything above 35 lots requires a comp plan change. And again, it's going to be inconsistent with the overall vision unless the plan commission's convinced that you're sealing the edge of the boundary with the village of McGuanago here with some transition. So, I mean, no matter what we do, we're going to have to come to terms with changing the comprehensive plan
Yeah,
along
Sean,
the boundary here.
I agree with you, but if you go with the smaller lots, then you're getting into a lesser value, let's say, of a house lot package,
Sure.
and then the tax base changes. You know what I'm saying? I'm just gonna throw a dart at the wall and say, house lot package would be 500,000, maybe 6, versus a 3/4 acre lot where you can build a bigger house.
Right.
Okay,
But I'm guessing, and the plan commission can speak for themselves, that you guys are going to want to see larger lots almost every time.
That would be my opinion, yes. I've been here 45 years, something like that, and it was always, you moved to Vernon because you got minimum of 5-acre lots. You know, the intent has always been to keep it as rural as possible. And that's still the overwhelming philosophy of most of the residents.
And I can't look at that picture and in my mind see what are wetlands, what is this, what is that. I don't have the history here of setting this overall plan. But so when I look at that, I just see
So,
lot density close to each other.
yeah, let me help clarify that a little bit. And obviously their concept isn't on here, but everything that's not green is where they're planning to put the lots. So the light green here is wetland, and it's not accurate because this is just based on the DNR wetlands. The darker green is environmental corridor that's just basically trees. So they're looking to tuck those upper lots in here. The remainder of the lots go here, and then south of Maple Avenue, they fill in the rest. So popping back to the plan, everything that isn't lot basically is environmental corridor. All the wetlands are in the environmental corridors. So there's some environmental corridors that aren't wet, but so for instance, this is environmental corridor here that isn't wet. That's off to the side. There's some other areas as well, but the majority of the corridors are wet.
So flip back to the other view again for a moment.
Sorry, I'm zooming out. So here's the,
Looks like if you're actually sitting on or standing at one of those lots. And I do personally think, to me, something less than an acre really doesn't sound like Vernon at all. But I'm trying to get this feeling you're trying to evoke here. So, it's just that if you're, when you put the two pictures together, you know, how much are people gonna be seeing of the natural area versus their neighbor's garage. That's what I'm trying to appreciate.
Well, going back to the plan, a lot of the, like for instance, these homes up here, they all back up. They all have backyards into the wetlands. So it appears that they have a very large, backyard. And that's some of the charm of these conservation subdivisions. You have a small lot, you have to take care of it, but you get to enjoy the larger natural area. So a lot of these perimeter lots have, great views, great, there's some, there's a few lots in here that are internal, right, that don't really have those views. But the vast majority of the perimeter does get those views as we go south,
And that's an interesting.
more of the same.
That, that's something that can be kind of worked into an evolution of this plan where every lot would abut an outlot or, have that type of clustered view where you don't have, anybody's backyard touching somebody else's backyard. That type of planning is possible with some refinement and modification.
So what basically, instead of pinching these lots together, there'd be more green.
Right.
Maybe this cul-de-sac gets removed and there's more green that comes in, dips down into there, that kind of a thing.
Can you just go back where you were there, zoom in on that Upper Peninsula?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Now, if you look at that road going up, is that whole road considered a cul-de-sac? Because it don't go nowhere.
Yes. Until it connects, until the connection's made, right? Once this connection's made, then essentially the cul-de-sac only goes from here down to this point because there'd be a loop. And so looking at a waiver for cul-de-sac length for temporary cul-de-sacs, because this would be a temporary connection point, you could consider that in your deliberations for granting a waiver for a longer cul-de-sac, being that eventually there'd be a loop road coming through here. Maybe 100 years from now, we don't know when, but there's a plan to connect it. So the cul-de-sac length would be smaller from here to here.
Not if the people in the River Oaks.
Yeah, if they never develop it, they never develop it. But
The first thing those people are going to say, no, there isn't.
we can't control that.
Yeah, I've had a number of calls already on that.
Right. It's already happening.
Guys, I got no right to speak here, but I farmed that farm for 5 years, and you'd be lucky to get 30% of the lots you're trying to put. That is a wet piece of ground.
And the further north you go, it's the wetter it gets.
Further north you go, it's
And the
worse.
drop off
There's a-
Maple
there's a
Avenue
road
is,
across that big piece in the back.
Right.
But there are swales up to the front near Maple that you will never put a house.
there's probably 100-foot drop off from the road.
Yes.
I bet.
And in that first cul-de-sac that you see, you'll never get houses. Not unless you want fish in your basement.
You talking about this one?
Yep.
Yeah, as you get towards the bulb, that's an area where part of whatever reaction we get, one of the first things we would do is groundwater testing and then septic testing, because that, even the way the soils are mapped there, that's kind of right on that edge. And to your point, absolutely, we're kind of aware of that. And same with the swale cutting through. The layout does account for the swale, but ultimately the lot count and the ability to put lots in appropriateness in certain areas is based on that next step, which is making sure we understand the groundwater and wet conditions and septic suitability.
So would you rather think about it and come back again to discuss the concept further, or do you want to give them some direction tonight? Obviously, it requires public hearings. We can't talk about changing the comp plan tonight definitively because it requires a public hearing to do so. But we could still give them some feedback tonight, or do you want to wait, come back in a month or whenever it might be?
Well, from my standpoint, I would be against that high level of density, that many houses in that area. I understand, kind of torn between yin and yang here, because, the person or people that own the property have a right to sell that land and subdivide it and make money. I mean, they've paid taxes on it for a gazillion years. However, you know, we also have to consider all the rest of the residents in the village and what their concerns are. Initially, I'd just be against that many houses going in that area.
Is there a number somewhere between, you know, that upper number and 35 on 362 acres that may feel better?
I was gonna say the suburban density residential, which we have to go to that category no matter what. It's a range. It's 1.5 acres per dwelling unit up to 4.9 acres per dwelling unit. So if the category was changed to that, there's no reason we have to allow the ultimate 100 units or 104 units that the district would allow. If you had a mind to change the plan to suburban density residential, we could still, when the development came in, cap it to 50 units or 60 units or whatever it is, even though the upper range of that category would allow 1.5 acres per dwelling unit. But again, you just have to consider carefully setting the precedent, even if you do allow a lesser density than 1.5 acres per unit, that we're changing it from rural density to suburban density. So it sounds like 100 units is too much no matter what. At least
Well, that's my opinion, yes.
That's what you're saying.
Yes.
Mario's. So then it's how much,
Yeah.
you're asking, well, is there any number between 35 and 100?
Yeah, the current plan says 35, and so changing the plan, what might you become? We might have to see a different layout, right? Another.
And part of the question may be, is part of this property, is there any support for that suburban type land use, and the other part stays at the, you know, the current land use? You know, do you acknowledge, you know, the opportunity for maybe two different lot sizes? Let's say the west area, or, you know, one of these areas is different than the others. You know, it doesn't necessarily, this isn't even all one property, it's multiple properties, and, you know, the areas are different. So I guess our ask is, you know, hearing that 100 is just too many, and we lose a little bit of the scale on how large of an area this really is when we look at a map like this. I guess that's kind of the question: is there support for something in between?
Well,
If it hits the goals and kind of looks right.
Can we just talk about the 300, I'll just round the acreage.
Mhm.
The 360 acres and all the wetland, floodplain, environmental land around the Fox River, around I-43, and we're saying we can't count that. And I understand what you're saying. You keep referring to it as gross acres, and I get why. It's just math. But it just strikes me as to count that under the way you interpret it is the better interpretation, simply because that is unbuildable land no matter what. You're not gonna be able to build on much of that land.
Right. You can't build on floodplain or wetland anyways. But I mean, if you look at the map, Karen, would you mind?
Oh, I'm
taking
sorry.
it back? Just going back to the land use plan again. Again, our plan allows 1 unit per 5 acres in the upland environmental corridor, 1 unit per 5 acres here.
Yeah.
And it even talks about development in upland corridors, but it specifically prohibits development in lowland
Right.
areas. And so that's why,
That's why you're saying
that's right. And so according to the
can't
plan,
count it.
yeah,
It's prohibited development.
It's-
You can't count it for any reason.
in the plan, it's not an overlay. It's just what the plan category is. And so the densities that I'm using are based on what the plan categories are. And that's, again, that's the way I interpret the plan. And until you tell me differently, that's how I'm going to interpret it.
Well, there is that land is being assessed at a very low rate, but if you can use it to count toward higher density and better land, it's not being economically, I mean, I think economically, for property tax purposes, it's being assessed the way you're saying it should be assessed, as opposed to what is being proposed.
Right. And again,
Because you're transferring value from land without value, because you can't build, or very little value, to get more development rights on land that you can develop. that makes that land more valuable, but it's not being assessed that way.
Right. And there's no, and the argument for, well, we're protecting that land as part of this, so we should get something out of it is kind of, great. It's protected in an outlot or something, but you were never going to develop it in the first. It was always going to be ultimately protected because you can't develop wetland, you can't develop floodplain.
And who's to say it's gonna be part of anything? I mean, it could be sold off to the county, because the county wants to buy all that land up on the river, all the way. So-
Right. The argument is if you had a 100-acre property and 95% of it was wetland, you had 5 acres left over. Should you be able to use that 100 acres to pack as
Yep.
much density on that
20 houses.
the 5 acres, a apartment complex on that one tiny sliver because you happen to have 100 acres of wetland in the back?
I just don't, I think that's
Right,
not
that-
in anybody's,
That's not the plan.
that's not the plan, and it can't be anybody's intent, because if it is the intent, then we would have different zoning. We'd have. Well, it's hard to me to even go to that, that suburban category at this point. Because of the presidential, because of the road, because of the long cul-de-sacs, because of the other pre-existing subdivisions that followed the zoning and the plan, and all of a sudden, now we're allowing an exception. Well, it's a buffer. Well, how about the next property? What's the next property? And there's no stopping it. I mean, there's no, okay, you're transitioning between this use and that use, but this use here is wide open yet, and the use after it is wide open, wide open, wide open. So there is I just worry about changing the whole character of that area in Vernon, quite frankly. I know we have smaller lots and so on by the interchange, but that's by the I-43 interchange. And those were long before,
Yeah, yeah.
The Village of McGuanago has a business park right next to this property. I just wanted to look on their land use plan to see what they had. I mean, they did have planned our property too, but,
That was when we were a town.
right, but I just want to let you know there's a business park right next to
Yeah, so that obviously checks
Right.
out.
yeah, and it's unfortunate the way the municipal boundaries are set and state law allowed things like this to happen. You look throughout the Village of McGuanago, and there, what I view as poor land use planning in their village, and the difficulties we have, on the border on Edgewood Avenue, between McGuanago and Vernon, and what they allowed on National Avenue, storage facilities and, things like that. We're at odds with that land use development in McGuanago. So I don't know what to say about that. Yeah, there should be a transition. In my view, it should be on the McGuanago side, not on the Vernon side. They don't really respect our way of life in Vernon. I hate to say that, but that's really
Well,
true.
no, it's obvious the direction that McGuanago's going.
Right.
There's no question. I mean, they're building those big boxes out there on 83 like crazy.
Well, on the multifamily and apartment buildings too,
Yeah.
throughout their village.
So they don't really care about you guys.
Nope, they absolutely do not.
So what would you like to do?
Well, we've given you some direction. You might not like it, but
What are the thoughts if we had a yield plan that had all 5-acre lots and it was more than 35? Would you still say no?
Sean, what?
I'm trying to do the
math.
not the math, but the logic in my head here.
Typical for conservation subdivisions, almost every community that has that zoning would have an opportunity for a yield plan. Basically, the the landowner would come in with, here's the equivalent of what we could get for whatever density we talk about. It's 5 acres per lot. And it's kind of, the onus is on the landowner to kind of show what a traditional 5-acre development would look like. And then also have a discussion with the village on if you would prefer to cluster them into 1-acre lots or do it as all 5 acres. But you kind of set the cap density based on what you could get in the traditional 5 acres per lot sense.
One of the problems here, though, is that if you have to have a rezoning to do that, because you have 80-10 now, which requires, so you have to have a RRD5, which is our rural density. It's the 5-acre density district, but subdivisions require conservation design. So you have to do conservation design under RRD5. So you couldn't just do 5-acre lots and eat the whole thing up because the zoning doesn't allow it.
So you said conservation 9?
Design.
Oh, design, okay.
Yeah.
What is the impact of that?
Meaning you have to preserve a certain amount of open space. They have to be smaller lots. They can't be 5-acre lots. They have to be smaller lots. But the overall density is no greater than 1 unit per 5 acres.
There may be a discussion, a different discussion for a different night for the group here, because the code is written to do something like what we said, maybe at a different density.
Right.
But I'm getting the sense that that may not always, in every part of the village here, be a desire.
Well, we do promote the RRD5 and the AD10. That's generally accepted because that allows some preservation of land, whether it's farmland. I mean, we were talking to the Craigs before. Their properties are RRD5, and their plan is to preserve farmland as part of their development. So they're going to do 1 unit per 5 acres, a couple of larger lots, and then when they do the actual subdivision part of it, eventually, it'll be preservation of ag land. So that's accepted. We've talked about that. I mean, we haven't had a lot of subdivisions in Vernon in a while, right? There's been one that's been in the northwest corner. That was a straight R1. It was already zoned R1 from a long time ago. Those are 1-acre lots. But it's been a long time since we had an actual large subdivision like this. So we haven't had these discussions.
Yeah, no, and it's something that I just wanted to bring up and to discuss. Kind of for that reason.
Yeah, it's been,
Since
I don't know,
2008.
2008 since the previous subdivision,
I
yeah.
was just gonna say, it's been.
Fully developed in 2008. It was proposed Overlook and Dalcourt.
Creekside, right.
Yeah.
That's,
Somebody asked me that and I thought that was the last one.
yeah,
Right. So I suppose you can look at that one, see what we allowed there.
Those were 3-acre lots, I believe, there, but there's preservations of larger outlots.
Right,
lot.
a lot back, behind those homes,
Right.
right? Right, there were 3-acre lots perhaps, close to center.
That wasn't zoned RRD5, that was zoned A3, I think, or A2.
I think so.
And as a result, we have very nice homes in there being built.
I'd be interested to see what it looks like. I wouldn't spend too much time on it. Not to the detail that you have to have here, but a sketch or something that just showed what 5-acre lots would look like. To see how it lays out, that couldn't be done under RRD5. It'd have to be a different zoning district with lockdown, with deed restrictions, so they couldn't be split again.
Yeah, it's just a discussion, so I'm just kind of pick everybody's brain and know what really the different drivers and intentions are.
And we may need some education on what they did down on Creekside and what, preserve, the conservation design and all of that.
Or the Plan Commission could look at the new one in New Berlin. That's or some of the ones that Siemens done.
Right.
Some are pretty nice.
Then if you do have a chance, if you've seen Kohler Ridge, that is one that EWM consulted Eddie.
Right, that's up in New Berlin, right?
It is on Lonsdale,
Yeah.
just west of Racine Avenue. Beautiful, beautiful subdivision. That one, what do we preserve, 120 acres?
Oh, more than that. Yeah.
What percentage?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
do you want them to come back with another different concept? Do you want to think about what's on the table here?
Well, from my standpoint, what's on the table here isn't going to go anywhere.
Right. So we don't have a number in mind, a number of lots in
I
mind.
really
but-
don't, no. I mean, I'm in favor of staying with the 5-acre concept, at least the density portion of it. My other concern is, of course, the septics. You start putting too many houses, that's wet enough as it is. It can be hard pressed to jam 100 houses in there with viable septic systems. You know, so I think the number has to come down. It's just,
Let's say 3.
Yeah, it's tough to give them, it's tough to say a number without seeing how they're gonna be configured in that, and keeping in mind the cul-de-sac length, and further north you go, and the elevation, and it's just, it's hard to imagine, I think, is what you're saying, Jim.
yeah, I mean,
The same, I mean, I had the GIS up there too, on my computer here, with, looking at the topo, and it's, I guessed 100, it's way more than 100-foot drop-off once you get close to the river. It's more like 200 feet.
Hmm.
So,
So do you want to see a refinement? Are you asking for a refinement, or what direction do you want to give them?
well, like I say, if they wanna put a subdivision back there, they gotta come back with a different plan. That's my cut.
yeah.
So obviously less density, right? Whether it's smaller lots or 5-acre lots.
Right.
Conservation design, you know, I keep the lot size at 2 to 3 acres if you're gonna do a conservation design. What you think, Sean? I mean, that's how Creekside is, and some of the others.
We'll go back to the drawing board, we'll submit something to you. You and Josh can talk a little bit.
And it doesn't have to be to this detail either, right? It can be simpler, so we're not wasting time, wasting money.
One of the things that may be important to us is, along with lot size, may be lot width as much as anything. And the reason I say that is, you can cluster a handful of homes, and I understand the desire to have a good setting and keep that privacy. But it is almost cost prohibitively expensive to put in roads nowadays, and to the point where, you just don't see the same kind of sprawling 3-acre lots with hundreds of feet of frontage. And there's a reason for that, because it economically can't be done.
Sean, what's our minimum?
Well, 150 is like the standard 1-acre lot
Right.
width. So you're saying that's too wide?
Well, I guess it's the question is, if we, and some of it is a function of the layout, right? If we have curving
Yeah.
roads and we're at 150 feet, they flare open larger in the back. So to have the flexibility to have like 120 feet, if it helped, or.
Yeah, I don't think it differentiates. Well, the way width is so the land division ordinance is different than the zoning, right? So land division requires 66 foot of frontage, 45 on a cul-de-sac or curved road, and then, but the way the lot width is calculated, it's just the average.
Okay, that works.
So there's some flexibility on the frontage.
Yeah. I mean, but on a straight road, you're going to have square lots or rectangular lots. It's going to be 150 feet wide the whole way, is what it's going to work out to. But if it curves or it's a cul-de-sac, it's going to be narrow at the road and wider as it gets the pie shape, right?
One last question, layout type question, just out of curiosity. If we looked at that North Island, that's an area of concern, right? It's kind of sitting up there on its own and really never going to go anywhere back through.
Up here.
We've done this in other conservation developments where we had, let's say, a really, the entirety of it is a kind of a loop, and in the middle of that loop is just kind of green space. An example might be Barnwood Conservancy up in the town of Lisbon, where you have, we have the cul-de-sac road because of the one means of ingress and egress, but if we have a big looped road in that whole North Island, there is kind of one straight section that goes through the trees, pull up our plan, but yeah.
So you mean if it just loops around
Yeah,
something like
loops
this?
like that, and you have lots all on the outside. Really, you have 2 points of access, so your cul-de-sac is measured, really from that narrowing in the environmental corridor crossing. It's the best you can do. Is that something that will be looked upon favorably?
I think that would be better. One of the issues I have is the excessive the number of homes on a long cul-de-sac. So I think if you can use that to shorten the cul-de-sac
Yeah,
length, it would be better
but let's say it's 25, 30, 28 lots.
around the perimeter of this.
And it may look like a kidney bean.
Right.
It'd be kind of fun. It'd be geometrically sound work for the fire department, but it could be pretty creative in a really kind of cool setting. Planting the homes where they want to be.
Yeah, I don't know though. Like, in our code, there's no definitive way to measure a cul-de-sac, the length of a cul-de-sac. It just says cul-de-sac length is this. Technically, the way we usually do it is, you take it to a point where, from the last loop, right? From the last 2-point connection is where you kind of measure it from. But is it really measured from here back, or is it the farthest reach here? Because this doesn't go anywhere but
It would be
itself.
the first part.
You think it's from?
Pretty consistent. Yeah, we've done it many times. For that, because if you have a
Because you have two ways around, right? If there's
one lane is closed somewhere because for whatever reason,
Yeah.
obviously you can always get to it.
Yeah, if the road's closed over here, you can still get to where you need to go, right? That makes sense. That would help, I think, a little bit in terms of the cul-de-sac length issue. I still don't know if it's still going to exceed 1,200 feet. We still need to change the ordinance to allow a waiver to make it happen.
Or waiver, right?
You can only waive up to 1,200.
Yeah, we need to make a waiver up to something else,
Oh, okay,
The
okay.
rule is 600.
right?
Yeah, but there's a lot of roads in Vernon that have.
Yeah, 600 in my opinion is really, really, really small. The usual is 1,200 or a quarter mile is the standard with waivers beyond that,
And we
with
talked about
no
that,
limit.
too.
We did talk about that, yeah.
Right. To make it longer.
To make it longer for special situations where it's topography or it's natural features or just no other way out, in or out.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for coming in tonight.
Good luck.
Thanks for taking time.
Okay, number 6.
Check your email because
All right, continuing on, number 6, Village President Report. It's a report not, you'll see the attorney's qualifiers on the reports always, not a Q&A. Staffing for the Village of Vernon Plan Commission. I'm pleased to announce that Karen Shu has agreed to work on a part-time,
Thanks, guys.
carving off one of her many duties as a full-time clerk administrator, now going to be part-time, and one of her part-time duties is going to take care of Plan Commission, which would be the agendas, meetings, minutes, all the calls, doing the research for Sean, taking care of 45 boxes,
52.
up to 52. At least for the time being, for probably 2 months, 3 months, and we'll just see.
Depending on what the new administrator has.
Right.
Right.
We'll just see.
Yep.
When we, fill the full-time administrator clerk position, we'll reassess at that point. But we do have an interim administrator on board now, and so that allows Karen to go part-time, probably starting, we'll talk about.
Yeah,
October
yep.
1st kind of time frame. So that is good news. Newman Hine proposed development. We talked about this, Sean. You haven't heard anything. I think the ball is squarely in McGuanago's court. This is the property, the Hine property down on Edgewood Avenue, where, and it's not only a border, but a jagged and completely irregular border. It looks like one time they annexed a little spot for a cul-de-sac, which they've now abandoned, but that border is now fixed, and we've asked them, we had one meeting, Sean and I had one meeting with their planner, administrator, and president, and that was the only meeting, and we talked about on this property only, to even out the borders within the property lines on a equivalent basis between Vernon and McWanago, so that no property owner had a lot that was in both communities, basically. And the village of McWanago was going to consider, and they preliminarily said that they would, although with great reservation, extending their sewer and water into that subdivision. And the only Vernon's waiting for an answer there. Vernon will have to accept that, but it would be on a very limited basis, that subdivision, and just because it's where it is and what's around it, which is not the case here on Maple Avenue, obviously. So, Village of McWanago, their first question was, well, how do we know that we don't want to extend it? And I'm like, neither do we. And so they thought by allowing it, all of a sudden they'd be sewer and watering the entire Vernon. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. So, so that's where that stands. Sean, you haven't heard anything since our meeting, our call. The meeting dates to review the checklist for development and models developers agreement. That was mostly me, aggressively thought that maybe we could tackle those projects. And my thought being at the time when the Newman-Hine proposed development was advancing, we would be doing those exact things, the checklist and the model developers agreement for that development, and at the same time, to save our time and our attorney's time and cost and Sean's, to do a model at the same time. So that's just been sitting there on hold, and I would say let's just keep it there on hold for now anyway. So there's the report there. And then the staff research on conditional use permits, site plan, plan of operations within the Village of Vernon. Karen has really headed up that project.
Right, and because of my staff is so short, I haven't been able to dedicate the time that I'd like to, but that's something, once things get straightened out a little bit here, we'll get back on that.
Right, and it's just our staffing problems, as everybody's well aware. Our village treasurer resigned, but we've got someone on board for that. Karen, of course, has resigned, but has agreed to stay on at least for a little bit here, part-time. And we had another deputy clerk resign, and we're down to 3 part-time deputy clerks.
Right.
That want to be part-time. They do, it's
Right,
all
that's
they
correct.
want to work, what they're working. And so I think when we fill our full-time position, administrator clerk, then we will be looking at that staff
Right,
and
decide what the village wants.
decide what the village wants and how much staff is needed and who's going to do what duties. So that's the report on that. So we're through the reports. We are now on minutes, August 10th. Now, first of all, I'll have to say, we forgot to put June 8th. It was tabled last time. June 8th minutes are ready to go, except they're not on the agenda.
But they're on the next one. I already put it on the next
Yeah,
agenda.
I already made a note. So now we're on June 10th. I didn't have any changes on August 10th.
August 10th, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't have any changes. Anybody have any changes? So I'll make a motion to approve the Wednesday, August 10th, 2022 Village of Vernon Plan Commission minutes.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. August 25th, we passed around a few corrections, I think. So with those corrections, anybody else have anything on those? This was our special Zoom meeting to keep Mr. Stouthammer project going.
Right.
So I will, with the changes made, I will make a motion to approve the August 25, 2022 Village of Vernon Board of Trustees and Plan Commission meeting minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. President, I just want to say Chad did call and thanked, again, the Plan Commission and the board for doing this special meeting. Even though he paid for it, it really, really helped him out. He was very appreciative.
Right, and I'm glad we could convene everybody together, if not by, with Zoom is fine,
Right.
And I know, Sean, you found that helpful.
Yeah, for quick meetings like that that are, off
One
schedule.
things in 30 minutes. It's the way to do it, I think. Okay, motion to adjourn?
Motion adjourned.
Sec,
First and then second.
one or the other. I'll do, whichever way.
Okay, I got it.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
Good night.
Well, it's a tough one down Maple, but.
It was good discussion.